Hello, you lot. Welcome to the latest Culture Trumpet episode, episode 7, which is awesome. Thanks for sticking around. We're having to do our own introduction this week as the voiceover people still aren't returning our calls for some reason.
Yeah, odd that. I'm not quite sure what's going on there.
No, me neither. We might need to put another email complaining about the lack of emails.
Yes, indeed.
Anyway, welcome to our very special festive episode.
Which, small disclaimer, may or may not actually feature any festive content.
'Tis but a minor detail, Mark. Anyway, this week we are having a special episode with a change of format.
Which is in no way based, in any way whatsoever, on Desert Island Discs.
In no way at all. So, without further ado, welcome to the Pluto playlist, which may or may not be based on that popular BBC radio programme.
Fantastic. Now, before we move on, as much as we're having a bit of a format change for this episode, there's one essential feature that we have to cover. So, Dan, have you seen Die Hard yet?
You sat down?
I am.
Yes, I have.
Now, are you teasing?
Would I really lie to you?
Yes, for comedic effect.
And because it's Christmas?
Yes.
Well, there's an ongoing debate that Die Hard is either a Christmas film or it is not a Christmas film.
There's no debate. It's a Christmas film.
And I can tell you that it is a Christmas film because I watched it yesterday. And it literally opens with them whistling Christmas songs. And the quote, yes, if this is there at Christmas, I got to stick around for New Year's. I'm not lying. This is a Christmas miracle. I watched Die Hard yesterday on Disney+.
I don't actually know whether to believe you or not.
I mean, I don't know how much attention I paid, but surely there's a question you could ask. This was inevitably going to happen that you wouldn't believe me.
God, okay. What was Sergeant Al Powell doing when he got the report that there was a problem at Nakatomi Tower?
He would have been buying Twinkies for his wife. And they just tried to make my car into Swiss cheese.
Okay, I think I believe you.
I have seen Die Hard, everybody, and I'm sorry that segment is now ruined. We'll have to find another cult film.
You've ruined it now. What the hell? Did you like it?
Do you know what? This is where I'll get crucified. I didn't.
Well, let's move on.
We can dissect that another time.
So, no, I'm just kind of holding back the rage, that's all. So, this episode, special one-off, we're going to do something a bit different. We're going to skip all the news things and the quiz things.
I can hear you biting through your tongue through gritted teeth there.
I don't believe I gave you permission to speak. And we're going to skip the kind of deep dive, and we're going to go for the Pluto playlist.
I'm so sorry.
I just need to compose myself before I say something I regret.
I didn't enjoy it at all. I thought it was very dated.
Shut your tramp mouth.
You shut your bitch mouth.
Yeah. Right. So, this episode, a bit of a format change. We're going to skip the quiz, skip the news, skip the updates, skip the deep dive. And we're going to focus on what we are calling in this wholly original format, Pluto playlist. Any similarity to the popular BBC radio show Desert Island Discs is completely coincidental. But what we're going to do is discuss 5 single tracks or albums that we would take to the planet Pluto, not to a desert island, and have on a playlist. And then we might have time for some honourable mentions and a few other options as well. Now, we've not compared any notes on this, so Dan doesn't know what I've got. I don't know what Dan's got. So here we go.
Before we do move on, just because you're bringing down the entire mood of the podcast, I think we should just address the elephant in the room that I didn't enjoy Die Hard. And I think that may be just down to, I think it's a film of its time, it's gained cult status, but if you're brand new going into it, in the 80s, I can imagine it being awesome. I just, wasn't a film for me, although Alan Rickman was incredible, as per. Why should I have enjoyed it so much? That's a question. It's not rhetorical.
Okay. I'll have to think about that one.
I can't believe this is the thing I don't get asked back for next week.
Right, let's carry on.
We genuinely haven't compared notes about this at all. And
No.
over the last few months that I've known Mark and we've been talking, Mark kind of has an idea, I think, of what music I like. So some of this might come as a surprise. But in my former internet life, let's put it, I used to run a website that reviewed music, and I did a 10 albums that changed my life post, like everybody does with one of those websites. That's where I got the idea from. Definitely not from BBC, because I didn't listen to that show.
No.
And I think this is going to be quite an interesting bit, purely because music is so personal. And again, the stories that may come out of why we've chosen that album might be quite cool.
Indeed. And I think as well, I've got a general gist that you kind of go towards the more heavier side in general. I think my kind of taste in stuff is maybe a bit more eclectic, let's say.
Yeah, that's fair.
Certainly when I've had conversations with other people in the past about what kind of music I like, there's been a few raised eyebrows in response.
Right, okay, I'm looking forward to this then.
So let's see where we end up with this one. So anyway, the main thing is the top 5 either individual tracks or albums that we would kind of choose to have with us if there was nothing else we could listen to again.
Yeah, exactly that.
So do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So my first album is the Die Hard soundtrack. It's not. It isn't.
No.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Now, come on. Thin ice, boy. Thin ice.
It's cracking around me. Right, okay. So my first album that I'd quite happily be stuck with is Black Sabbath's Black Sabbath.
Okay.
It's their first album. It was released in 1970. And to be frank, it's the album that changed and invented a style of music. And the reason why it's so special to me is it was the first... So I'm of a generation where I was generation tape and then CD. So vinyl, I didn't know what vinyl was. And It was the first album that I remember seeing or discovering in my grandparents' loft when I was a kid. And it happened to be my dad's. And I remember putting it on. No idea what it was. And I was probably maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 or 9. Quite young.
Okay, yeah.
And I don't know what it was, but that kind of just loud noise. I'm a loud person anyway, and anybody you know will say I'm a loud person. Just resonated with me. And then as we'll embellish as we go through this segment, it'll become clear of why I think I've stuck with that as my first album.
Okay.
And just I can't really put it into any more terms other than that was one of the first first albums I listened to as a kid where I thought, "Ooh, I like this."
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I'd listened to whatever music was on at the time, but it was one of the first albums that was just, this is what music is, right? You can like this stuff.
Sure.
And then from then, of course, you know, whenever that was in time, then I discovered who Ozzy Osbourne was. And then you can imagine then what that opened up to me as a young kid.
Yeah.
And as I say, it was my dad's records. He was a big AC/DC, Iron Maiden fan, and that just introduced me to that kind of rock scene.
Okay. I don't have any kind of rock stuff in my top 5, but
that I can understand.
There's some there in the honourable mentions, and I'll cover that when we get to it. There's not many rock stroke metal bands that I like, to be fair. It's just not, generally speaking, my kind of thing. I mean, there are some I actively can't stand.
Now, that's an interesting point. I'll interject it here before we go into other things, because I've not got anything super heavy in my list, right? And that is my background, which we'll come on to.
Yeah.
But is it because of the lyrics and you can't understand it?
No, it's just. Do you know when just something just grates you the wrong way?
That's
It's
cool.
like
That's cool.
I cannot stand Axl Rose's voice, for example.
That's quite a unique voice to pick on in the first
Sure.
instance, but he's got that quite whiny.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool.
So that kind of rubs me the wrong way. I don't like the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Right.
Right. There's something about their style that just again just rubs me the wrong way.
That's interesting. Okay, I'm looking forward to seeing where yours goes then.
Yeah. There's a few that I like, but yeah, not many to be
Okay.
fair. To be fair, but that's cool. Okay. So my first one is the soundtrack album, and it's by Max Richter, and it's the soundtrack to The Leftovers.
Do you want to explain what The Leftovers is for our listeners who won't know what that is?
That is the HBO series that lasted 3 seasons about an event, let's call it, which is never fully explained, which is kind of one of the things I love about the show, where a proportion of the world's population disappears, and I think it's like a fairly small amount, 4 or 5%, something like that, without explanation. And as the name suggests, it's about the people that are left over, right? The people who are left behind, and how they cope with it. This kind of sudden loss of children. Literally in the opening scene, one woman, her toddler disappears from the back seat of a car when her back's turned, literally gone. The kind of parents, husbands, wives, all that kind of thing, and the kind of the unexplained nature of it, people searching for an answer. If some people of a religious persuasion think it's the rapture, that people have been
Yeah.
called to heaven. Well, one priest kind of has a huge crisis of faith then, because he's a priest, he's done nothing but served God all his life. Why wasn't he rewarded? It's not about the event as such and what the event was, but it's the effect that it has on the people left behind.
Yeah, that
And
makes a lot of sense.
and it's a very kind of melancholy downbeat program.
So in terms of the music, because I feel like you're missing the point.
Yeah, so the music kind of fits that melancholy tone.
Is
There's
it
a real
orchestral? Is it electronic?
it's a bit electronic and a bit orchestral,
Okay.
but it's generally, I get the feeling it's kind of this guy on his own, maybe with a couple of extra musicians, right? It's not big and grand. It's very kind of downbeat, almost sad music, I guess.
Okay.
But it matches the tone of the program. It's a very melancholy score. It's one of those perfect matches of music to visuals, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that. Yeah.
And kind of capturing the mood of the program and so on. And it's not something you'd listen to necessarily if you wanted to cheer yourself up, but as something to have on the background, or just some kind of mood music kind of thing. It's just really effective.
And how long? Sorry, did you say that was a whole album or just a track?
Well, that's the soundtrack as a whole.
Okay, because
So
that's a good
let's
amount
say
to listen to on the way to Pluto. Okay, that's a good. So that's our first sort of instrumental piece added to the Pluto playlist.
yes, indeed.
I don't have any instrumentals on mine,
Okay.
mainly because I took it more as these are the things I'll only ever listen to, and
Yeah,
orchestral's nice, but if I'm on the way to Pluto, I'm not relaxing, am I? Let's face it.
That's true.
Any more to add on yours before we continue?
No, that's it for me. I'm ready for your second one.
Okay, so we're moving past, I don't know which frigging planet is next, Mars? Moving past
Probably.
Mars?
Are we that far already?
Yeah, mate, Elon's got it nailed. So I'm fast forwarding a slightly bit now into my musical exploration. this was around the time where I had discovered Busted.
Oh.
So I'm, again, pre-teen, listening to all this sort of generated music on the radio, and really starting to follow what a band was, how that worked, getting excited for their new releases. Fun fact, when Busted released their second album, A Present for Everyone, I remember saying to my parents, I don't think I'm going to get it just because it's going to have all their first songs on it with a few more. And the concept of an album meant brand new songs was completely alien to me at that age.
Yes.
So it's not a Busted album, you'd probably be pleased to know.
Relief. It's
But
probably the best word.
my first honourable mention is Busted by Busted. Just because it was an album and a band that was the first band I sort of like idolised as a kid.
Oh, okay.
They were this, teeny, punky, anarchist, and the image was anarchistic to a degree. But yeah, hard to really put it into words. I remember how it felt, but yeah, I probably idolised them. Whereas like people idolised Take That, the Beatles, and Spice Girls. Yeah. Mine was Busted.
Okay.
But around that time, a little-known American band released an album called American Idiot.
Oh, God.
What?
Go on.
Did I sigh when you said mine's orchestral?
No, sorry. Oh, go on. Tell me more.
So, my next one is Green Day, American Idiot, released in 2005.
Okay.
Now, this is where my music taste shifted from, music put out for kids, essentially, to music that was grown up. And Green Day was still a bit teeny, punky, kind of jobby, I think. I don't know, but it was grown up music, and it was around this time where I started to learn instruments for the first time. So I was already a drummer. By that point, I'd had drum lessons for a number of years, but it was here where I went, I want to learn guitar.
Okay.
Because that music there went, oh, that sounds fun. And I don't know, it's an album with a story. It's not just music. There's a common theme throughout the whole thing. If you've ever listened to it, it's an anti George Bush album.
Okay.
Which is quite amusing because Billy Joe Armstrong, the lead singer and songwriter, came out the other year and said, an album I wrote over 10 years ago is relevant again now with Trump, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Trump being the American idiot, one assumes.
Well, yes, yeah.
But it's an album that's gone on to be massive successful, with its Broadway show as well. But to me, that was where my ambitions as a young kid went, I want to start learning instruments and learning music.
Okay.
I don't know, I played American Idiot at my wedding, which was pretty cool, with my friend and a band. A weird one to play at a wedding, I guess. But again, that opened me up to loads of Green Day. And they were one of my favourite bands, still are one of my favourite bands. Seen them a number of times, and they're just not as good as they used to be. But again, it's just that style of music has stuck with me for a very, very long time.
Okay.
I don't know what else to say about it, really.
All right. No, that's cool. I suppose because like musical tastes are so individual, if other people aren't into the same thing, you can try and persuade them. Like, I am sure that some of the ones I'm going to mention, you're going to be like, what the fuck is that?
I'm curious why you hesitated when I announced it. Is it because it's Green Day and they're now considered a manufactured, company, if you like? They're a business now more than a band.
I mean, here's the thing, right? Are they? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm aware of who Green Day are, but I've really very little context of them.
Right. Okay.
I've heard the stuff. I've heard some of the stuff they've done. Obviously, American Idiot was one of the biggest.
I think they have become that, and that does frustrate me because the last few albums haven't been amazing, and they were a DIY independent band, in California at that time, and as they've got bigger, they won't play a smaller venue than a stadium. You're never going to see them in you'll never see them on a tour of grassroots venues anymore.
No,
even though that's
no.
what got them big. But yeah, they are a bit copy paste. They're now a bit copy paste with their music.
Okay.
And I think they put albums out. They've had to put albums out to fulfill the contract, not because it's music they are overly passionate in.
I see what you mean. I think one of my honourable mentions is a little bit like that in terms of their last two or three albums have been far from their finest work.
Okay.
Um, so I get what you mean there. Yeah, I think because we're talking stuff that is maybe 15, 20 years old here. We kind of grew up on essentially.
Well, mine are very much like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas now some of these musicians, they're in the late 50s, maybe 60s. They're not going to be jumping around screaming their lungs out like they were before. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
No, I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that.
And so the style of music that they play kind of has to change with their physical abilities, I guess, to play it
Sure.
and perform it live and all that kind of thing.
I mean, say that's the
Um,
Rolling Stones like, but I know what you mean.
yeah, yeah, but it's like it's. But then it's like this isn't these aren't the songs I loved 20 years ago.
Mm,
What they do now, and I think there's a certainly for some of mine, or I think in general, there's like when it's the stuff you grew up on, there's like this sweet spot period of maybe 10 years where everything they did was just perfect.
sure.
And then the stuff they've done since has just not lived up to that.
Mm, sure.
All right, so my second one is a single song, and that's Stop by Erasure.
I mean, fantastic band. So congratulations.
Brilliant. So I grew up in the 80s, synthy, poppy kind of stuff was all the rage,
Mm,
and they were kind of mid to late 80s and 90s pioneers of that kind of music. And to be fair, there's quite a few I could have chosen from because they've done some absolute belters, but Stop is a song that hits the ground running and does not stop until it stops.
yeah.
And it's just fantastic. It's like, I think if you want to if someone says what's Erasure's music like,
You show them this.
hit them with that one,
Okay.
and that answers all the questions. It's kind of it's kind of fairly fast paced. It's some good lyrics. It's kind of the Vince Clarke on the keyboards is doing his thing. Just a joyous kind of slice of electronica
Now, this,
and campus Christmas.
sure. I mean, some of the best music is, and
Yes.
you can be the hardest metal fan in the world. You've got Slipknot tattoos and Slayer is life, but yeah, everyone's gonna like that guilty pleasure of ABBA, Mamma Mia on a night out.
That's it.
You
It's
know,
that
and,
kind
and,
of
and that
thing,
gets
yeah.
your foot tapping. But like
Yeah.
what I was going to ask was the albums that I'm talking about in my section, I own in one way or another, and of recent years, most people have started collecting vinyl again, and
Yeah.
I nicked my old man's vinyl years ago because he didn't have
Yeah.
a player. So yeah, I still have his original Black Sabbath, which is cool. I was going to ask, do you have the songs that you're mentioning on any physical media, or
Yeah, most of these I've got on CD. Not vinyl. I've got a few vinyl, but only a very few, a handful. So most of these I do have on CD. I used to buy CDs a lot. Some of these, I'll be honest, are kind of I've only got through streaming, Spotify, that kind of thing. But I'd say the majority I do have on CD or have bought in the past on CD. My kind of collection space now is really given over to films more than music.
that's
So
fair enough. I mean, vinyl. I collected CDs years ago, but vinyl now, with the age of streaming, I've given up on CDs.
yeah,
But vinyl, they're a little bit more expensive, but they're more collectible in my eyes because the artwork's bigger
yeah,
and
yeah,
you get
absolutely.
variants of them. So CDs have gone by the by, I'm afraid.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, ultimately, I have Spotify Premium, which lets you download the stuff as well as stream it. And while it's not difficult to rip a CD to MP3, for example, nothing beats the convenience of just looking up a song in Spotify and adding it to a
You're
playlist, and
not
away you
wrong.
go.
You're not
You
wrong.
know, I know it's not the best way to get money to the artists. That's a whole discussion for another time. But in terms of, like, at least it's not being. At least I'm not pirating the music. I'm paying for a subscription, so
Yeah,
at least
exactly.
I'm contributing something, right?
Yeah,
And it's a legitimate way to get the music. It might not be the best for the artist, but I'm kind of, my conscience is clear to a degree.
yeah.
Um, and as much as, yeah, I have CDs. I do have a few vinyls, and I've got a turntable and whatnot. But when I can connect my phone to my amp and play the music directly from the phone through my sound system, I don't know whether I could be asked to get up and get a CD or a record out and press. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from because gone are the days of making mixtapes and CDs, and I
Yeah,
burnt
yeah,
MP3 CDs to play in my car because again,
yep,
Spotify and Bluetooth didn't exist.
that's right. Yep.
But I like the tangibility of a vinyl, and to
Mm.
me, it's more of sounds really stupid. More of an event. You sit down, you
Mm,
listen to it
mm,
more than just stick it on in the background, And I've got some amazing memories of just sitting with my mate who is a massive music fan like me,
mm.
and he'll bring up 4 or 5 vinyl. I'll bring 4 or 5 vinyl. We'll get down. We'll get a bunch of beer. We'll just sit and talk crap about the music we're listening to.
Yeah, yeah,
And to me, that's a good night.
yeah. And it's an interesting one, that, because I feel the same way. See, I don't mind. I'll happily stream music and hook up my phone and whatnot, and so on. But if it comes to film, I'd rather watch the physical copy of the film,
Right. Okay. Cool. That's
because again, it's
interesting.
that tangible thing, right? Of, it's going to be better picture quality, better sound quality on disc than it is streaming it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a thing of, okay, I can go on Disney Plus and within a few seconds I can start streaming any Marvel film, but I've still got all the Marvel films on disc because it's that physical object that is, you'll
It's not
always
gonna let you
have.
down, is it?
Yeah, exactly. If the internet goes off, I can still watch a film. Um, so no, you're right. It's the tangible thing, isn't it, of having the actual item.
And to me, again, I'll come on to again why I'm choosing some of these things. But I've got a slight background in music
Mm,
production. Like, I studied
hmm
it at school, and on some CDs they are MP3 format.
mm,
And if you know anything about MP3, it cuts out a lot of frequency.
yes.
So for me now, buying a vinyl is going to be the best possible quality you could have in physical media when you play it back.
Mm,
Because digitally, yes, you can have lossless, and Apple are pioneering that, and it's bloody cool. But again, it's digital, it's not analog, and there's this whole argument that you shouldn't be listening on digital, or I don't get into it because I'm not that big a fan, and I don't particularly care that much about it.
yeah. Okay. Mm. I mean, the kind of vinyl versus CD thing is probably, and again, a conversation for another time.
Well, one wears, one doesn't wear that well,
Yeah.
much, doesn't it?
I don't know if I'd necessarily agree that vinyl is the best sounding option.
Okay.
Um, if you've got a new album that's been, the end to end, the workflow has been entirely digital,
And then press
uncom-
it something
un-
analog.
uncompressed digital, and then it's recorded out to, you know, CD quality, not MP3 compressed, but like a standard proper CD quality audio.
Yeah.
That's going to sound better than vinyl,
Okay.
which could introduce the pops and the crackles and
And
the
that is a
wobbliness,
fact. That is a
you know.
fact.
But having said that, some vinyl sounds a lot better than others.
Completely agree. And a lot of it is
Um,
down to the plant and the equipment that's doing the pressing.
yeah,
Where you are instead
absolutely.
pressing, the quality of the vinyl, it's obscene.
Yeah. Yeah.
For example, I've got a copy of Rammstein's latest album, Untitled, and my friend bought it at exactly the same time. Bought a brand new vinyl player, and it kept jumping.
Yeah.
And even in mine, it kept jumping. I've got a semi-decent vinyl setup, and I took the seats at the album back, got it replaced, came back, and again, you look online then, and because the way it's been mixed and pressed, it plays at 45 RPM, and
Right.
because it's such a loudly mixed record, your needle needs to be pristine, otherwise it jumps.
Right. Okay.
So thankfully, it was just a case of actually cleaning the damn thing, and it worked.
Also, the album 12-inch played at 45.
Uh-huh.
Oh, right. Okay.
I know, it's not normal for a full
No.
length.
Okay. Right.
But it sounds immense. But it's too good for its own good, if that makes sense.
I see what you mean. No, I see what you mean. Okay.
Maybe that's an honourable mention because it's a bloody good record.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Okay. So what's your number 3 then?
My number 3 is, again, moving slightly forward in my musical journey. This was the first album that I got introduced to by this band, and it was one of those albums that was bought as a Christmas gift. I had no idea who they were, and it was a case of family member went to Asda, when Asda used to sell CDs,
Oh, yeah.
and said, what are all the kids listen to these days? And he was handed this. And that would be Muse's Black Holes and Revelations.
Okay. Right.
So
right.
that's the record with Knights of Sidonia on it.
Yes.
Which I would quite happily listen to on repeat forever. And this is where my, Christ, I'll say it, obsession with guitar music came from now.
Okay.
And where Matt Bellamy became a guitar god in my eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
To the point that I own a Manson guitar, and I wanted to ever since I saw their live show from Wembley on the Harp tour,
Okay.
where he's playing those guitars. And it's not a Matt Bellamy signature model because they cost thousands, but it's a Manson guitar, and he now owns Manson Guitar Works, which is pretty cool.
Oh, right. Okay.
But this is where I started following Muse from, and again, a band that I've seen plenty of times. I've got all their albums on vinyl, and yeah, they've released some questionable things over the years, but I think for the most part, they're 3 lads from Devon that became the international rock stars.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
In what, 20 odd years? I don't know. I can't remember how long they've been a band, but it's just, it's hard to talk about because they are my favourite band of all time.
Okay.
And with every album release, I get a bit more, this isn't what I liked about them.
Yeah.
Well,
that's going back to what I was saying earlier, isn't it? It's that sweet spot.
Yeah.
And we've kind of moved beyond that, haven't we?
Agreed. They've gone from, so you got Black Holes and Revelations, Origin and Symmetry, Absolution.
Yeah.
They're just fantastic albums. And for me, this is again where my guitar ability was getting good. And I've learned so many Muse songs. They're so fun to play, and that is where I really honed my skill as a guitarist.
Yeah.
The problem I have with Muse is some of the politics got a bit fuddy, and I think he's gone a bit up himself with some of the things he sings about and writes about.
Right.
But for me, it's more about the riffs and the production of the record versus, what they're really singing about. Like Slipknot, one of their lyrics, "I'm going to slit your throat with a wound." It's not great.
No.
But the music behind it is more powerful to me than the lyrics.
Okay. No, that
So,
makes sense.
Disaster Pieces by Slipknot, honourable mention. But it's not... you can enjoy a song for the individual parts of it versus the whole thing,
Yes.
There may be a certain song which has trash lyrics, but the riff or the drums or the bassist or whatever you're into is phenomenal.
Yes.
And you can latch onto that. Now, for me, Muse is that. They've got some bits I don't like, I don't agree with at all. But the musicianship is key, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. I'm with you on Muse, to be honest. I do enjoy them. They're a great band. In terms of Knights of Sidonia, I'm not a musician at all. Right, never picked up an instrument since music class at school, right? But Guitar Hero 3,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Knights of Sidonia, boss level on that.
And again, I think the lyrics behind it for me are powerful. No one's going to take me alive. The time has come to make things right. You and I must fight for our rights. You and I must fight to survive. Quite a we're not going to be beaten song, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No,
And
no,
it's
it's a
just that closing riff is just massive. And when you're stood in a stadium bouncing around with your mates, cider
mm,
going everywhere, moshing away
mm,
to it, it's just there was no
yeah.
better feeling at a show for me that.
No, 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 I'm with you on that. It's great band, and a great album. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's my
okay.
number three, sir. What's yours?
My number three is a single track and is "Babies" by Pulp.
Good band, another good band.
Love them, love them. So obviously, kind of 90s was, Brit pop, and the big thing was, is it Blur or Oasis that you're a fan of? And for me, it was neither really. Um, Blur were okay, but they felt a little bit too kind of oi oi, kind of forced, kind of
Laddiness.
laddiness, right? What geezer kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
thing. And Oasis were like, all right, kid, mad for it. And I'm just like, they're a bunch of dickheads. They're a bunch of dickheads. There's songs that they both did that I enjoy, right? But of that era, Pulp as a band, I just felt were far better than both of them. I think Jarvis Cocker as a lyricist, his songs really, they tell stories. Do you know what I mean? It's like a short story put to music. A lot of his songs, and Babies is one of those
Okay.
where it's not one of their, maybe not one of their most well known ones. It was one of their kind of not early ones, but maybe slightly before they really took off with like Disco 2000 and Common People.
I was gonna say that's the
Um,
pulp that I would know because I'm not a fan per se. I know the
sure,
singles, you know.
yeah. So I think Babies was from their album before that, right? So just before they kind of took off. Um, but it's one of those ones, like I say, it just kind of tells a story, and it's very kind of rooted in growing up in at a certain time in a certain place. It's kind of very relatable in terms like teenage awkwardness and friends and your mates and that kind of
In the
thing.
north as well because they're
In the north,
from Leeds, I
yes,
think, are
Sheffield,
they? Close, right?
Sheffield, yeah, yeah, yeah. So whereas the others, like Blur and Oasis, were kind of putting on more of an I don't know,
An
the
act to a
an
degree, I'd
act,
say.
yeah, I guess I was gonna say that. I thought, is that right? But yeah, it
Well,
probably is.
probably because they are also a band, you know, that I don't know about Pulp, but Oasis and Blur famously had feuds and public feuds, and
Yeah.
yeah, it all
And
got a
that was
bit
all kind
dick
of
swinging, didn't it?
manufactured by the record companies and by the press and all that kind of thing. Whereas Pulp just kind of plugged away in the background, writing songs about things that I just felt were more kind of true to life. Like you really feel that he was writing about his life and what he really knew about. There's no kind of like pretending to be anything that he wasn't in those songs, if you know what I mean. And there's certainly a lot more humor. You look at something like Common People, there's funny lines in that song. Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
Which you'd never accuse Oasis of having an excess of humor,
No, no, not at all.
or
They're about as funny as a colonoscopy.
yeah, exactly. Or, whereas with Pulp and with Jarvis Cocker, you get the feeling he never took himself too seriously.
That's
Not
cool.
that he thought, not that he thought it was a laugh and it didn't take the work seriously, but there was never that sense of him being like up his own arse. You get the feeling that the songs are very kind of honest songs, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair.
And yeah, I would choose that one as one. More the fact that Disco 2000 and Common People, they're the ones that everyone's heard of, right? The big hits. This is, as I say, one that's maybe not quite as well known. But again, if someone was to ask, what, who are Pulp, I'll go, well, listen to this, listen to the lyrics, and kind of you'll get it from that.
I like that. I do like that one. That's a good entry.
By the way, the plan is that we're going to put our lists together and make a Spotify playlist for
Yeah,
all of this. So you'll be able to kind of check out all of these things
but also as
for
well,
yourself.
if you follow Culture Trumpet on any of the socials,
Hmm.
I'm genuinely interested to see what other people listen to. I'm
Oh,
always up for
definitely.
listening to new things or things I've never, I can rediscover. A lot of my things are very, this is where I was in my life, but
Yes.
I come from, I did music A level. I've played instruments since I was, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old, and I still do to this day, and
Hmm.
play music.
Hmm.
I'm very interested in anything musical.
I'm always, as you will see as we go on, certainly on the honourable mentions end of things, I am always open to listening to new stuff. So yeah, absolutely. If anyone has got any recommendations, drop them in replies, send us messages, and definitely, broaden our horizons. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Cool. So moving
Your
on.
next one. Yeah.
So I'm going back a few decades again now, and this was the first album that I think I listened to, and I went, "This is a perfect album,"
Mm.
and that is 1980s AC/DC "Highway to Hell."
Okay.
And I say 1980, it might have been released in 1979, but 1980 was in my research looking earlier.
Okay.
And how dare a band open an album as good as Highway to Hell with Highway to Hell? Like, how dare they be so bold? But, you look through the track list. Highway to Hell, obviously.
Yeah.
Girls Got Rhythm, Walk All Over You, Touch Too Much, Beat Around the Bush, Shut Down in Flames, Got It Hot, If You Want Blood, You've Got It, Love Hungry Man, and Night Prowler. I mean, AC/DC have umpteen albums,
Mm.
but to me, I think this was the first album that I listened to that every single one was phenomenal.
Okay.
And again, I own an original pressing of it. It's to me, valuable. It's not really, but again, this is where I think the vinyl versus digital. For me, the vinyl takes the cake on this one because I just think it's so clear, even though it's pressed and it's not digital.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's because of the music that it is. It is raw, unedited in brackets,
Mm.
under
Mm.
inverted commas, rock and roll. It's pure energy, and they are a band that have been around for donkey's years. And a lot of people will argue they put out the same music every time, same album every time.
Yeah.
Well, that might be the case, but they are pioneers from the other side of the world that broke the entire world when they brought this style of music to the masses.
Okay.
There's probably some sense in there.
No, no, I get that. I get that. Uh, Again, the one that I'm not kind of that. Obviously, I know who they are. I've heard them, and Highway to Hell is. I'm guessing their kind of most well-known track, right? So I'm kind of familiar with them to a degree. But again, they're not one I particularly listen to a lot. But I can certainly appreciate them more than I might like them,
Okay,
if you know
that's
what I mean.
interesting. Because again, from when you grew up, I'm surprised that they weren't more on the radar at that
They
time.
were. Well, they
Well,
were
for
in
you
general,
specifically, not on your
just
radar,
not
maybe.
on mine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I kind of they were there in the background as like, oh, it's another one of those bands that I don't like their
Sure.
music, right? But I can get their influence. I can get their kind of status and
Mm.
importance within the kind of history of that genre, right?
Yeah.
So as I say, I appreciate them more than I like them.
That's
Um,
fair to say. But again, for
yeah.
me, it's more maybe it's less about them as a band and less about the music they've produced over the last 40 odd years.
Hmm.
And it's more about this is the first record that I remember listening to going, oh my god, that's perfect.
Sure.
So that's why it's on there. And I'm
Mhm.
still an AC/DC fan to this day.
Yeah.
They put Power Up out a few years ago, which is a few years ago, maybe last year, I can't remember.
Okay.
which is their newest album, and it's a tribute to Malcolm Young, who passed away a few years ago,
Okay.
who was one of the founding members of the band. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's not a fantastic album by no doubt, but it's a tribute to him, and that's why it's good.
Sure. No, that makes sense. That makes sense.
So my one honourable mention, when I was coming up with this particular album, I was torn between Highway to Hell and For Those About to Rock, We Salute You. Again, just because that's an album that's just bonkers. But to me, that's my honourable mention for AC/DC, because I just couldn't tie it up. But Highway to Hell in my brain came first, and it was the first record I listened to that was perfect in my eyes.
Okay.
Give me a 4.
Right. This one is again, it's just another single song, and the song is called "Song to the Siren." Now there've been a few versions of this one. The latest version I've heard was used in Zack Snyder's Justice League, in the sequence where the Flash rescues Iris West from the car crash.
Yep, I know the scene.
Yep. And that song comes on, and it's all ultra slow motion. So that "Song to the Siren" is used there, but this particular version that's my favourite is by Tim Buckley. It's an incredible song, and I just think his version of it, his voice, it's just kind of dreamlike kind of quality to it. It's difficult to describe, but it's just one of those ones you put on and just you kind of washed away with it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think your descriptions are far more poetic than mine.
Well, what can I say? But no, it's just one of those ones again where you just
You can get lost in it by the sound of what you're describing.
That's it. It's not even about the lyrics, right? Because half of the time you're not necessarily paying attention to the lyrics. It's the rhythm and the tone of the voice, and it's a very spare in terms of the instrumentation, right? I think it's him and a guitar, and maybe just like a bit of electronic synth kind of thing in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. So it's very bare bones, and it's just there's something about it that's you get swept away with it, and that's it really. That's all I've got to say about that one.
That's good. That's good. I like that. I'm looking forward to listening to the things that you've talked about, because again, maybe I misunderstood the brief, but more likely I think you misunderstood the brief. I haven't put any singles in here, but that might be my honourable mentions at the end. And we got some questions
cool.
again. This is going to go well over the hour, listeners, so I hope you're strapped in. So
I do have some albums as well in terms of the honourable mentions. But I think there's how can I put it? I think with an album, I've got to be in a certain mood to listen to an album, right?
I know where you're coming from.
If I want to put a whole to sit back and listen to a whole album end to end, I need to be in a certain mood. If I just want a bit of musical accompaniment, maybe while I'm driving or doing a bit of work or whatever, I'll put on a playlist of different songs.
Sure.
You know? Whereas an album is more of a kind of stick it on from the beginning, sit back with a drink,
and enjoy
close your eyes, and just get into it, kind of thing.
Because this is what happened in recent last few weeks. In fact, Adele managed to get Spotify to remove the shuffle feature by default on an album.
That's right.
And I think that's absolutely right. They spend they spend time building that record to sound a certain way, and when Spotify goes, do you know what, you'd really like to listen to this jumbled up? No, it doesn't work, especially with albums like American Idiot. It's a story.
That's right. And you know, they take a long time to choose the opening track.
Yeah.
And the closing track, and there's a very good reason.
Yeah.
And when you shuffle, you're kind of fucking up all that hard work. There's a flow. There's a certain flow to an album.
And I used to listen to albums on shuffle, but in recent years I have really stopped and gone, hang on, no. Unless I'm listening to a singular track, I'll listen to this end to end, because there's been a reason why it's been made this way.
Yes, that's it, exactly. And those kind of you see sometimes those behind the scenes footage where they're doing an album in the studio, and they'll be deciding the track order.
Yeah.
You know, they're not just stuck on there in any old order. They go, we're going to open strong with this one,
Yeah.
and we're going to close with this one. You know, and it's all right. You can take individual ones and listen to them individually, but if you're going to listen to an album, you should listen to it in the order it was put together in.
Yeah, absolutely bob on.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, we digressed as always.
As always. Well,
Go on. What's your next one?
my last one, again, I think this is slightly, I don't know if it's slightly on the nose, and I'll be honest, I don't really know why it's on here. I think for me, it's more of an album that I would quite happily just listen to. You know, if you were given 5 records, this is what you had to listen to for no apparent reason than I think it's a bloody good album.
Mm-hmm.
And it's another album that, well, I was torn here between A Flash Flood of Colour and The Minesweep, both by Enter Shikari.
Okay.
Now, A Flash Flood of Colour was the album that introduced me to Enter Shikari,
Mm-hmm.
and it was from there that I saw them about 3 or 4 times in the same tour cycle, because I just fell in love with this band and what they stood for, and you know, it was electronic drum and bass metal kind of thing. But The Minesweep was the first album that I thought, that's the first album that I bought and pre-ordered and got really excited for by them, and I bought the big fancy vinyl book, which had like all the fancy photos, the production stuff in it, and how they made it and all that shit. But they're a band I still follow. Saw them the other week, in fact. They were amazing. But again, they're very anti-establishment. I like what they stand for. Musically, I think they're all brilliant, and they're really nice guys as well. I've met them once at an album signing, and they seem genuinely nice guys. But again, it's an album that has got some really good, like, Rage Against the Machine, fuck you, we won't do what you tell us kind of thing. And their blend between heavy metal and electronic music sits with me really well as a heavy metal guy that also grew up on the likes of Pendulum drum and bass and stuff like that. That sort of marriage of those two genres sits well with Shikari and me. Maybe it's just a bloody good record, and that came out in 2015.
Okay.
I discovered A Flash Flood of Colour whilst I was doing my music tech A level.
Right.
And a friend said, "Oh, have you listened to these guys? They're touring soon." I was like, "No, I have no idea who they are." And he said, "I listened to Destabilize." Okay. And lots of wob-wobs, as you describe it. And then he said, "Oh, their album's just come out. Here, I'll lend it you." And yeah, it was just another introduction to a band of, oh, these sit well with me. Yeah, that's about it, really. I'm going to take your lead on that one. They were just a bloody good album by a bloody good band.
Yeah, that's sometimes that's it. That's all you need.
And a lot of people will say Common Dreads. No, sorry, Take to the Skies. Yeah, Take to the Skies and Common Dreads, the first 2 records, are going to be their number ones. But for me, no, I didn't discover them around that time. I came quite late to the party. Glad I came to the party. But to me, it'll always be the album / next album that you discovered by them that got you into it in the first place.
Yes. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Okay. So my last one is an album, and it's Nick Cave, and the album is Murder Ballads.
Okay.
Right. And as the name suggests, it's basically an album full of songs about death, right, of one form or another. The track the track that most people are probably aware of from it will be "Where the Wild Roses Grow," which is the duet he did with Kylie Minogue.
I mean, that sounds familiar to me. I'm not a Nick Cave fan, but I've heard of that.
So that was a big hit. Probably more the fact it was Kylie Minogue than it was Nick Cave, and it was done at the kind of height of her fame, let's say. But each song on the album is told, it's either about a killer or from the perspective of a killer, and it's difficult to describe. Really, it doesn't sound very enjoyable, but it is. And in the same way that Jarvis Cocker kind of, it's almost poetry and storytelling, this is the same way. There's a song on there called O'Malley's Bar, which is almost 15 minutes long, and it's basically describes a guy going into a bar, I guess kind of Old West kind of times, and it describes how he goes through the bar, killing every single person in it,
Bloody hell.
right? Who they were, how they died, right? But it is poetry. I mean, the lyrics are so kind of visual, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I know.
You can
Paints more of a picture
it
than just
absolutely does.
words and noise.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
and it's just as a whole album. It's a concept album, right?
Yeah,
It's all everyone is about death and murder and killing. But what a fucking concept, and
okay,
what an
okay.
album. And yeah, it's not jolly or funny,
Doesn't sound it, to be quite honest, mate.
no, but it paints. Yeah, his lyrics are just there,
Okay.
and they paint a picture. So I'll finish on an album
I like
with
that, mate. I
Nick
like
Cave,
that.
Murder Ballads.
Okay, so let's just recap our five things, and then
Hmm.
they'll go into a playlist, and then we'll just step through some of the other notes that we had. Again,
Yeah,
more general musicy things. So
yeah,
my top five albums / songs that I would happily be blasted to Pluto with are Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath,
yep,
American Idiot by Green Day,
yep,
Black Holes and Revelations by Muse,
yep,
Highway to Hell by AC/DC, and
yep.
The Mind Sweep by Enter Shikari.
Okay, mine is the soundtrack to The Leftovers by Max Richter, Stop by Erasure, Babies by Pulp, Song to the Siren by Tim Buckley, and Murder Ballads by Nick Cave. Now, I
Excellent.
think you got in a few honourable mentions as we went through. Do you have any
Yeah,
more?
I guess, Year 3000 by Busted as a track,
Mm-hmm.
just because, again, that was the first song I listened to. I was like, oh, I like these. Oh, these are brilliant.
Mm.
I love What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong. I think
Oh
that's
yeah,
such a lovely piece of music.
yeah, yeah.
But again, I can't say I'm a big Louis Armstrong fan because it's just sort of that song.
Sure.
In terms of other, like, I'll pick a soundtrack that I'd stick with, on my way to Pluto, probably the Back to the Future soundtrack,
Oh yeah,
just
yeah.
because it's my favourite trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think because Alan Silvestri clearly did some amazing music on that, and
Yeah.
just that, da 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 da, you know what that is as soon as you say it, as soon as you
Yes.
hear it.
There are very few scores where just that 1 or 2 second snippet and you know exactly what it is. And yeah, that's one of those few. Yeah, I will go with Metallica by Metallica.
Finally,
Uh,
one I can get behind.
so that was the first kind of rock metal album that I heard that I thought, "Do you know what, this is good. I like this one. I like this." Now, my understanding is it was the first one that was produced by Bob Rock. So I think there's more of a bit of a polish than the earlier albums had, which I don't know how some fans of their earlier work reacted. They may or may not have liked the kind of bit of extra slickness, but personally, I love every song on that album. Load and Reload as well, I think are fantastic. Um, but again, they're ones where I think those three albums are all brilliant. But then I think again, as they've gone on, the few that they've released since then, they've kind of Saint Anger was an interesting one because that came out.
Don't mention Saint Anger.
It's an interesting one because it came out as it was like a product of them going through that kind of split and Jason Newsted leaving and all that
Yeah, yeah,
kind of thing and the rehab stuff. And I think it's interesting in its, let's say, rawness, right?
that's fair.
Um, but it's interesting
But what I'll take
rather
from
than rather than good,
sure,
you know.
what I'll take from Metallica is, I again,
Mm,
for listeners, that's also referred to as the Black Album.
that's right. Yes, yes.
And again, how audacious must a band be to open with Enter Sandman of all
Mm,
songs? And again,
hmm
Mark, I have to absolutely wholeheartedly agree with you there. That is one of the best albums of all time.
Yeah, it is a fantastic one, and
And Enter Sandman, Sad But True, The Unforgiven,
yeah,
Nothing Else Matters, Through the Never. I mean,
just banger after banger, and this is from someone who until I heard this album was not a fan in any way of rock or metal,
fair, mate, fair.
but it was like, oh, this is good, and then that kind of opened me a little bit more, maybe a bit more receptive, right? I'm still a bit fussy when it comes to the genre, but I'm certainly after that I was a little bit more receptive and open to listening to other things.
Fair enough, mate.
Um,
1991, that was.
yes, God bloody hell. Next up might be an unusual one, and it's not a particular song in particular, but it's more of an unexpected artist, right? And that's Matt Berry,
Okay.
right?
Right.
Yeah, you may or may not know that as well as being one of the funniest fuckers on TV, from the IT crowd and What We Do in the Shadows TV show and various other things, he's also a really good musician and singer, right?
Right, okay.
And he's had several albums out, and they're best described, I guess, as acid folk jazz,
Right, I expect nothing less of Matt Berry then.
right? But they're really fucking good. That's all I can say. I'll stick a couple on the playlist, and you can decide for yourselves. But yeah, Matt Berry has some great albums
Okay.
and some really catchy songs. Um, Next up is I is a bit of a wanker, but I like quite a bit of the stuff that Kanye West does.
Okay.
One of my favourites
That's your
is when
opinion.
yeah, always a wanker. Don't get me wrong, but separate the art from the artist, right? No Church in the Wild, which is one that he did with Jay-Z.
Oh, sure,
Um,
sure, yeah, that's
yeah,
fair.
I love that one. That's probably one of my favourites of his. But yeah, I kind of like his stuff. Little Sims, who's a British artist, she's also acted in Top Boy on Netflix. Um, she's had a few albums out, and is just kind of becoming a bit more well known now.
Okay.
3 songs of hers I would recommend is Venom, Offense, and Introvert. They're just fantastic, fantastic songs. Um, a couple of scores would be Elliot Goldenthal's score for Alien 3,
Right.
which is just majestic, and Graham Revell's score for The Crow.
Okay, cool.
So that had 2 soundtracks. There was a soundtrack of songs, and then there was the score. And this is the score. And, that's a really kind of melancholy film, obviously, with what happened to Brandon Lee. It's kind of just the whole atmosphere of the film is very sad and downbeat, and the score captures that perfectly. The Prodigy, Fat of the Land.
Uh, Again, we're just naming fantastic albums now, aren't we? I mean, yeah.
I told you I'd got some albums on the list somewhere.
I'll say this is the thing. My eclecticness doesn't come out in my top five,
I
but
see.
I mean,
I
yeah,
see.
that kind of just thumping music to have a
Yeah,
dance. I say dance, a
just right.
rave to.
And again, they've done others. They've had brilliant other tracks since, but as an album, as a collection of songs to listen to together, I think that's the best thing they've done. Just
Yeah,
fantastic.
I agree.
Um, there's a song by an artist called, I think I'm pronouncing this right, is Laza de Sella, who she died a few years ago now, but she did this song called Anywhere on This Road, and it's kind of difficult to describe, right? It's kind of a slow moving kind of song. It's got this the background kind of music, the backing track is almost kind of a North African, Middle Eastern kind of vibe in terms of like the sounds and the instruments and the rhythms in it.
Right.
Um, I first heard it years and years ago. It was used on a cinema advert for Sky Sports,
Right.
right? Cricket.
Ugh.
And it was, I know, but it was when Sky, yeah, they got the cricket, and it was basically played as a backing track to this kind of ultra slow motion footage of cricket.
Isn't
It was
all
like,
cricket slow motion?
well, this is very true. But the song was like, oh, this is a cool song, right? And it's just a song that I've always loved. I've always loved it. And then the last thing is, again, it's more of a genre than a specific album. It's UK drill, right? are,
Okay.
are you familiar with UK drill?
Yes, because I've seen it written, but I can't say I've listened to it because it sounds appalling.
It's kind of, it's like heavy hip hop, gangster rap, kind of influenced, I guess, and it's been quite controversial because a lot of it is kind of become infamous because it's done by certain like gangs, especially in and around London, and it's kind
Okay.
of used almost as them kind of showing off how violent they are and that kind of thing. So that there was a thing a few years ago where YouTube were taking down videos. Police were asking YouTube for to take down videos
Oh wow. Okay.
because they were kind of promoting gang violence and gang culture and things like that.
Right.
But I think, in fairness, it's come through that now, and there are kind of artists and groups, I guess call them groups, gangs, whatever, who are kind of actually through that side of things, and again, that is very kind of rooted in the culture and their experiences, right?
Sure.
So it's very kind of, although it might be kind of bragging about how hard they are and how tough they are, there's definitely an element of kind of real experiences there.
Okay.
And again, the lyrics, when you listen to them, they're clever lyrics. They're very, sometimes just out and out funny, but they're very kind of, it's not just about the bragging and we're tough and all you pussies better watch out kind of thing. It is,
Sure.
there is an actual, again, a poetry to it. Um, and I'll add a couple onto the playlist. There is, obviously it's a youth thing, right? And it's gangs and groups of kids or teens kind of putting this music together. But there's a couple of UK drill artists called Pete and Baz, who are two white pensioners
Right.
who basically, um, Pete, I think it was listening to some like hip hop and garage music that his granddaughter was playing and quite liked it, and got together with Baz, his mate, and said we could do this, right? And apparently the kind of grandkids and so on like help them write the lyrics in terms of keeping it relevant, but they do the singing.
That is
And
amazing. I want to hear
and
that.
they are brilliant. And at first, the whole thing was like, "Is this a wind up? Are they taking the
Yeah.
piss?"
Yeah.
But they're really good, right? They spit the rhymes. Do you know what I
Spit
mean?
bars. Yeah.
And they've done, they've done collaborations with proper drill artists.
That's pretty cool, man.
Um, so they are kind of, they're not taking the piss. They're clearly having fun, right?
Yeah.
But they're not taking the piss.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, that I think that covers my honourable mentions.
Nice. I think the one last one I'd throw in there, just because it always brings a smile to my face, is Mr. Blue
Mm.
Sky by Yellow. And if you're a bit down, whack it on, and I guarantee
Yeah,
you'll cheer up by the end of it.
I'll go with that. I'll go with that.
Um, I mean, we've got plenty more musical things we could talk about, but I think that's good to leave for another episode, to be quite frank.
Yeah, sure.
But
Okay.
at the beginning of the episode, we didn't promise you any festive content,
We didn't.
but I think we should maybe, because this is going to go out around the festive holidays.
Yes.
I think maybe we should throw some festive content in here. So this is your festive content alert.
Is there a Christmas song that if you had to have it on repeat from now until the end of time, you'd be happy to listen to?
There's maybe one or two, and I think
Mm.
ours might be the same.
I think you might be right based on previous discussions, but go on.
Yeah, and I think, well, there's two choices. It's got to be either putting up your Christmas tree, proper Crimbo selector, If you've never heard that,
I'd forgotten about that one, but yeah. Okay, yeah, I'll
just
go with
because
that
it's
one.
funny.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
in terms of an actual Christmas song, which, again, is this the piss take? No, this is legitimate.
Yes, yes.
Is Don't Let the Bells End by the Darkness.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
rocky. The lyrics in that are clever, and again, it
yeah,
took me years to realise it was a piss take on Bell End,
yeah.
because I'm innocent like that. But it's just, yeah, a lot of Christmas songs that you hear on the radio every year are just the same nonsense.
Yeah.
And Elton John and Ed Sheeran have done two this year, in fact.
God, yeah,
And
yeah.
the whole Battle for Christmas #1 thing, I think, is outdated. It's
Mm,
pointless.
mm.
I just can't stand it. When Rage Against the Machine got it, I say livid. I was elated because
Yeah,
it broke the mold. And
yeah.
there is a band trying to do it this year to beat the masses. And I don't want to say the names because it's so offensive.
Mm.
But he's got a song out about Boris Johnson still being a "See You Next Thursday,"
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
you know, I like what they're doing in terms of, these people shouldn't be getting to #1, but I think there's maybe a better way of doing it.
Yeah, yeah. I think the darkness, the don't let the bells end. Absolutely, I think it's a perfect. I mean, it's not new anymore, right? It's about 10 years old, I guess.
Something like
But
that.
but it's like it's a perfect new old Christmas song
Yeah, I
in that
agree.
it
There's a
has
choir, there's bells.
it is everything that those quote unquote classic 70s Christmas songs have.
Yeah,
And it fits in perfectly. If you didn't know it was a new song, it would fit in seamlessly with any of those
it
others
is
on the
quite wizard,
playlist.
isn't it?
It is,
Yeah,
it is. But it's funny, and obviously it's Justin Hawking, right? So yes, it's funny. Um, yeah, yeah, just brilliant. It's pitch perfect in terms of like its tone and its humor, and like as you say, it's not taking the piss. It's a serious effort at a Christmas song,
and it's been
but
very popular ever since.
yeah, but it knows it knows it's fun. It's not taking
Yeah,
itself
it
seriously.
knows it's parody, but also it's a deadly serious venture into the world of Christmas songs, and it made
Absolutely.
it.
Yes, it certainly absolutely did. One last quick question.
Okay,
Okay. We've gone through all the stuff we love, right?
right.
Is there an artist that on our way to Pluto
Yep.
we'd stop off first at the sun and launch this artist into the sun?
Okay, so we're going backwards to go forwards.
We're
I
going
like this.
backwards, we'll pull a U-turn, we'll go back to the sun, kick him out, pull a U-turn and head off to Pluto.
I have a few, but to keep this
Hmm.
bit short, I'd quite happily boot Chris Martin and maybe not all of Coldplay, but maybe just Chris Martin from
Mm.
Coldplay
Hmm.
out. I think it's Starbucks music. I don't think it's that revolutionary anymore.
Okay.
And the whole eco message they push, I agree with, but I think it was only that message of we're not going to tour until it's eco-friendly for us to do so only
Mm.
lasted until they needed to put a new album out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I could be completely wrong. That's my opinion. But the whole we're going to create a stage or a floor that our audience can dance on to keep the music going. I mean,
Mm.
they've got a lot of boring ass songs. That stage is going to go dark when people stop dancing when Yellow or whatever comes on.
Mm. Mm.
But for me, yeah, I'd quite happily kick Chris Martin out.
Yeah.
I'd give him a suit so he doesn't burn up instantly, but yeah. Go on, who would
I
you be?
would Bono.
Just him or the other guys too?
God, just him. He's a twat. What's annoying is there are quite a few U2 songs that I do actually quite like.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too.
Right? Certainly from around the time of their kind of Zoo TV era, right?
Right.
90s again kind of time. Um, and they've done some good songs, right? But fuck me, Bono's insufferable. He really fucking is. And I think probably the biggest thing that puts me off about him is for all his kind of thing about, taking part in charity stuff and raising money and blah blah blah. Him and I think the rest of the band have all kind of done their best to avoid paying a decent chunk of tax. You know, they were named, or he was certainly named in the Paradise Papers
Oh dear, I didn't know about this.
as
The
investing
Panama
in a
Papers?
the Paradise Papers
Oh,
from
there's been a few
back
of
in,
them.
yeah, these were 2017.
Right.
The
Okay.
Paradise Papers. I think the Panama one's more recent. But
Right.
he invested in a company that was based in Malta, which is famous for being low tax, right?
Right.
Um, and then which then um, owned a company, which in turn owned a company based in Lithuania, and that company paid no tax in Lithuania despite making profits. Then it was transferred to Guernsey
Oh,
again.
geez, I can see where
Do
this is
you know
going.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not that he's kind of breaking the law because all of these things are legal, right? Whether they should be or not is another question. But technically, these things aren't breaking the law. But it's like,
You know what
you
you're
know,
doing by that point.
you got to practice what you preach, right?
Right.
If you're doing charity stuff and kind of, then fucking cough up a few quid yourself, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? All this stuff about poverty and all this, you know, if they'd have just fucking paid the tax in Ireland where they're based or where they're from, the money they paid in tax could have fucking cured poverty in fucking half a dozen countries. Do you know what I mean? And he kind of said, "Oh, you know, we've got some smart people working for us to be sensible about the way we're taxed." Yeah. So you're employing people to make sure you don't pay a lot.
I'm with you on tax avoidance.
So it's just, yeah, it's just a twat.
Okay,
Can't
I like
stand
that.
him.
I like that.
I
Cool.
think that's it.
I think it is. I mean, that's a long one. If you've stuck through it, I'm impressed. And
I mean, that's what your mum said. Um,
Jesus Christ,
eh,
that's my
wah,
fault.
wah, wah.
Um, I mean, yeah. I mean, if you've got any songs that you'd be stuck with, or you disagree with us, then shout. I'd be
Yeah,
interested to hear. Keep that feedback coming because there's been so much.
we will get a playlist together that you can listen to and kind of see what you think. But yeah, definitely send us more suggestions, thoughts, and feedback as always.
Yep.
And have a good Christmas.
Yeah, or any
And
seasonal holiday you may be celebrating at this time
yeah,
of year.
yeah,
But
whatever it might be.
we're gonna take a slight break now,
Yep,
just so we can have time with our families and such, and we'll be back next year, I
we
think.
will. We will back in January, and we'll see you then.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's lots to talk about. We've both seen Spider-Man, so that's going to be a hell of
Yay!
an episode.
We might have to do a special on that one.
I think
Yes.
we're going to have to because it's going to
Yeah.
be a belter.
Absolutely.
But yes, have a lovely holiday season, and yes, thanks for sticking around.
All right.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.